Hi, everybody. Okay. And everything is running. Okay. Can hear me. Now, there it goes. Okay. Because I want to be able to see. Can hear me? Yep. Everything. Okay. So let's get started. I'm coming on a bit early today. Thank God. It is 9:35 p.m. on December 29th, 2025. Merry Christmas. It's still Christmas. It's still Christmas tide. Went out and looked at some beautiful Christmas lights tonight. Got in the mood, because so many things are happening with, when the intel and the special forces community is reaching out to you, you know that in a positive way, and they're very sick and tired. I can tell you this: they're very sick and tired of the abuse that's going on in our government and our military. And when you know that you've won the narrative is coming out, the true narrative is coming out when the intelligence and the special forces community reaches out. Okay. They know that Richard absolutely was smear campaigned. They know that CID was up to no good. They know that FBI, El Paso field office was up to no good. That assistant special agent in charge. He was really the special agent in charge, Connell Wetton. He's been at that office for a long time, decades. Why is that? I think special agents in charge have come and gone, and I think they're just figureheads. I think the main guy there in the El Paso field office is Connell Wetton. And so that's what we want to talk about today. What the information that is coming in, the way we got the information that he leaked Richard's. Well, he doxed Richard's name. He leaked Richard's identity to the cartel. That the cartel confirmed that Connell Wetton was their inside man there in the El Paso FBI field office. It's very interesting, and it's no mistake that Nadal Baim was impersonating an FBI agent, and well, that's a crime. That's a crime, and that we reported that. We talked to the FBI agents that were appointed to us, and they, just excuse after excuse after excuse for, like Nadal Baim wasn't anybody. He wasn't anybody, just some guy, just some random guy. And here he is, a Palestinian arms dealer, absolutely connected to dealing in El Paso with El Paso Police Department on Fort Bliss. Um, and the father-in-law of Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Bugado in the G3 of the 32nd ADCOM Richards Command, and being connected, family ties with Gustavo Sanchez, cartel that was the Texas Ranger assigned to our case, and of course to Manny Chavira, um, the chief of police. The chief of police without the proper credentials for that job, that got that job right after the Walmart mass shooting. Surprise, surprise, not. And that is family connected to Nadal Baim and Brett. It's and they think they can just get away with saying, "Okay, I'm FBI, and your son was found dead by the FBI." And he didn't say that to us. He was saying that to a cashier in a Dollar General store. He was saying it to a cashier. He just could not hold it in that he had inside knowledge with the FBI, that the FBI had taken trafficked or the someone trafficked our body to our son's body to Mexico, and that they, were piecemealing it back together over that they were operating, that the FBI were operating in Mexico. I mean, think about that. Think about that. That's, and of course that was corroborated because we called many different agencies, and that was corroborated over and over again. What Nadal Baim was saying was right, and but no, he's just a nobody. He's just a nobody. They never thought that we would figure out who he is. And that was a miracle how we figured that out. It was a real miracle. God's been on our side. And just like I was talking about last night about Candace Owens and all the things that have been happening with her, and reporting these things. And of course, she has main sources, right? She has main sources, but she has no bigger source than God. God is really, you can tell, is really giving her so much information, because, those that are being exposed are making mistakes. They're just making mistakes. And that exposes them. And it's the same thing with like Nadal Baim and so many others um, that have been in our case. And if you're just paying attention and just vigilant day in and day out, the truth comes out. And they can't help themselves. The truth just comes out. You cannot live a lie. You really can't live a lie. Um, so let's get started, on this 1,977 days since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room there on Fort Bliss. That same building has an arms room in the basement. He was forcibly taken to that room. They took his life. And that room. It was totally renovated without sparing any expense, without following the regular protocols for bids and everything. And that was under, um, well, this is the thing. We received this information from someone that is involved in this Mormon faction, and that is DES Thomas Kane. DES Thomas Kane is absolutely part of Colin Wetton's Mormon faction, along with Lilani Hart, along with Tavita Nusa, who was CID. And he lost his credentials, right, and was separated from the military. And his brother, Major Solomon Anusa of mortuary operations, is part of this Mormon faction, and it reaches into the Walmart mass shooting with Justin Underwood presenting false tampered evidence, and with Felix Valenzuela introducing tampered evidence to really uh, to form to keep the fake narrative of the Walmart mass shooting, right, and to retaliate, discredit whatever the whistleblower in our son's case. It's very connected. Everything's very connected, and it's this Mormon faction tied to the the cartels. And when you know who Colin Wetton is, that his family is huge over there in Chihuahua, Mexico. I think they run a bank too. I think they even had some problems with some money laundering through their bank, but they are very, very wealthy. They have a lot of unexplained wealth. Let's just say that Colin Wetton's family has a lot of unexplained wealth, and his loyalties, clearly are with his family in Chihuahua, Mexico, in his religious um, Mormon faction group. Um, I would say Mexican organized criminal group. I think that's a good way to say it. And here he was, like really the de facto special agent in charge, because he's been there in that office and um, in El Paso for decades, for decades. How does that happen, you know? And so, especially with all the unexplained wealth, and especially for allowing all of this criminal activity. If he was so good, you know, why would he allow all of this criminal activity? And there is no doubt at all of the fraud and the criminal activity, okay? If they were doing their job, it just wouldn't happen. And what happened to Richard, what happened to Glendon Oakley Jr., what happened to so many others, so many others. Think about it, over 400 bodies were being recycled at Plenitude Crematorium. And, you know, it's the the level of the crime, the la diabla, you know, the she devil, um, targeting pregnant women, women in pregnancy crisis, okay, that really need our sympathy and our help and our that need good leadership to get them through something like that. No, they're being targeted for their organs, targeted for their uh, babies, and for their life. And they're just counted as nothing, and disposed of in the most rat infested, maggot infested places to be, you know, shuffled around for humanitarian aid of an unidentified migrant again, you know. It's just really, the level of crimes is just absolutely stunning. And now, with everything happening in Minnesota, you see the level of crime there that has been exposed many times before, but now it has like national attention. And I wanted to play a video for you. I hope I can get it to work. You know, I'm not too fast with all this stuff, but a video for you that I think is very important, and it really connects to what happened to us a few years ago, and it corroborates, just like Mitch Snow, his tunnel finding with the military involved with the Mexican organized criminal trafficking through these tunnels at Fort Huachuca. Um, you know, and knowing that the military was very dirty in all of this with Richard, and absolutely connected to the trafficking. And we know that there's lots of tunnels, and those have been exposed now. And, you know, you don't think that Colin Wetton, you know, being there for decades and decades, when my dad told me years ago that there were tunnels everywhere, you know, working there on Fort Bliss and on White Sands Missile Range and at McGregor Range and, you know, all of that. He was a missile repairman. So, you know, he knew that there were tunnels everywhere. So, I mean, El Paso is a mining area. Of course, there's tunnels everywhere. It's known for its mining. Um, you know, so it wasn't a surprise. And you don't think that Colin Wetton doesn't know about this, you know, and to put a target on our son's back the way he did, when he's supposed to be protecting, being the major law enforcement in the area. Um, yeah, it's really shocking that he's engaged in cover up and criminality and cover up, instead of you know, trying to get clarity and transparency. He's engaged in criminality and cover up. So absolutely, it- you know, we're not stupid. We're not stupid. We know that they've been getting away with this for a long time and laughing. But, you know, um, this is happening in Minnesota, and this is happening in other places too. So it's being exposed, and I wanted to play you this one video about what's going on in Minnesota, about the daycare centers. If you don't know, the a group there, like we have in El Paso, the Mormon faction. There is a Somali group in Minnesota that has really all out organized criminal fraud in the billions of dollars, um, raking in millions for each daycare for 100 kids or 70 kids or 80 kids or 99 kids or whatever that they're licensed for. But the thing is when you go there, there's not a child to be seen, not a child to be seen at all. They're just raking in the money, and then what they're doing is that they are using that money. Of course, they skim off for themselves. They skim off for Somali pirates, I guess, Somali criminal activity there in Somalia. But then they send a big hunk of it to their political um, candidates for the campaigns. They were sending money to like Washington State, to individuals that they wanted to support. This is election tampering. This is campaign tamper, using this kind of money, fraudulently using this kind of money and laundering it through the through these dirty hands to fund campaigns, to fund our campaigns here in the United States and the different in different states. So Minnesota was financing Washington State um, uh, candidates and their campaigns. And this really covers a lot of what we've been saying, that there's high stakes involved in election tampering, and that everything is about the election tampering, okay? Because we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and we have a say so, and it's called the election. And they have been tampering with the election to get their candidates in. And why do they want to do that? Because they want their candidates controlled. They want those candidates to have the keys of those very important positions that control law enforcement, that control the judicial system, that control appointments, that control files, that control uh, justice, right? That's what they want. They want to obstruct justice. They want to control it or weaponize justice against their enemies, and then they want to be able to act in their organized criminal schemes with impunity. They just want to be able to do this, and that's why they've been getting away with it for so long. For so long, they've been getting away with these fraudulent schemes that people have been reporting and reporting and reporting and dying for reporting, like Richard, reporting and reporting and becoming whistleblowers and then being retaliated against. And they get away with it. And people, I cannot tell you how many posts, messages that I've read where the people are saying, "Oh, but nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. They're just going to get away with it. They always get away with it. Nothing's going to happen to them. There's no arrests. Where are the arrests?" I can't tell you how many. Well, now if we have compromised senators and compromised congressmen, which we do, and then we have compromised individuals in positions that cover for these criminals, instead of operating with transparency and clarity and engage in criminality and cover up, then they're going to get away with it because it's our law enforcement that has been invaded. It has been our judicial system that has been invaded. It has been the appointments or constitutional crisis in some instances, like the El Paso Criminal Law Magistrate Court, where not one judge is elected, and that's a constitutional crisis because ever since 2015, that court, those judges need to be elected because it has full countywide jurisdiction. And so I'm just going to keep saying it and keep saying it because it's illegal. It is a constitutional crisis. And it really, those appointments that go in there are dirty. These are compromised individuals. We know that. We know that through Penny Hamilton. We know that through Anthony Aoun. We know that through so many that they know information. They know the Mayellas. They knew about Patrick Crucius. You know, the application for appointed counsel came out of that court. It's just so dirty. Millions and millions of dollars were then spent on Patrick Crucius when he comes from a wealthy family. So it was just so obvious that that there is a scheme going on, a scheme and a fraud going on in our courts and everything. And that's why elections matter so much. And, with this whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein and President Trump, and, I read some of the most ridiculous things like President Trump saying, oh, but some of these people are my friends. I don't think he talks like that. He doesn't talk like that. No, he doesn't say that at all. He says, release all of this information. That's what he's been saying. And, and he is the one in 2019, his administration, that had Jeffrey Epstein arrested. And, if they were so concerned about, the information in these files are, that have been totally tampered with, y'all. I can tell you that because Richard's files have been so tampered with. That, you know, why didn't Biden release all of this stuff, right? Why weren't there calls for 4 years in that disgraceful administration and releasing, especially the way they were going after President Trump? That would have been just prime evidence, right? Prime evidence. But they didn't do it because, what they're telling us right now is a lie. And those files have been tampered with. And the real problem here right now, there's going to be no justice, nothing going on unless we get our elections sorted. We have to get our elections sorted. We can't have this cheating anymore, y'all. We can't have this election interference. And so that's really the big message today. And so I want to play this video for you. It's very short. It's very short, but it's very important. And then I'm going to follow up with how it applies to Richard's case, to our case. Let's see here.
So guys, this is absolutely mind-blowing. So I was watching the most recent video by Nick Shirley exposing these daycare centers. Now, they're going daycare to daycare, and the next one that they go to is called Sweet Angel Childcare. This is where they show up to. And this is the business right here. Sweet Angel Childcare in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, listen to where this phone number goes to when you call this child care center. Just wait for it.
Thank you for contacting the Office of Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. Our office is located at 130 State Capitol at 75 Reverend.
Oh my God. I'll do it again. Sweet Angel Childcare. It goes to Governor Tim Walz's office. Why is a child care center directly going to the office of the governor? Make it make sense. Hold on.
Thank you for contacting the Office of Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
If this is not a direct link to Tim Waltz and these fraudulent child care centers, I don't know what else is. Bro, this is this is crazy. I'm just in shock right now. I was recording a YouTube video and reacting to this video, and I was like, let me call and look up their Google reviews. I was just looking up their Google reviews, and I was like, let me call this number. And I call it, and it goes to Governor Tim Walz's office. Make that make sense.
Wow. Wow. And now we know that a lot of this money that they were fraudulently collecting for these fake daycare centers where there's no children there, were being used to finance campaigns, going to candidates, right? Going to candidates and officials for a reelection. So this is huge. But what was I thinking about? What was our family thinking about when we were watching this? We were thinking back to when we were being continuously for months, every day, harassed, threatened through through phone numbers that were like burner phones or VoIP phones. And, you know, it was so bad. And they were so vile and so vulgar and threatened us and harassed us and intimidated us. And, and I'm pretty thick skinned, so I could take it, I could take it. But after a while, what you saw is that they had access. They had access to our files, our son's files, our family's files, my husband's entire military career file. And thank God he is just, I have the stellar son and the stellar soldier uh, husband. And they just had access to everything. And they were then, sending us messages through these phone numbers to intimidate us, to threaten us, and they didn't have much, right? That's why they used so much intimidation or just really ugly threats. They had access to the entire adoption file, okay? I mean, they had and that's thick. That's thick, okay? So, they had this whole they had access. And so and that's what was so bad about these calls. And we decided that we would figure it out. We would figure out a way to find out where these phone numbers were coming from, where they were coming from. And the results were so shocking that I was afraid to mention it to people, because if I tell you that you're going to have these Somali daycares and a number of one of the daycares is going to go to Governor Tim Walz's office, you would think, no way, no way. But here, that's what happened. And so, I had to be very careful how I presented this evidence. Of course, we turned it in. We turned it in because it was just, okay, I'm going to tell you where it came from. It came from Santa Clara. There were several numbers. One was Santa Clara, California, right there, Stanford University, right there, the hub of Silicon Valley, which connected with a phone number in that same area that belonged to Major General Clem Coward, Richard's general, right? Um, Another number came from NATO. It came from NATO, okay? Uh, yes, it was just shocking. And then the other number came from a location very close to the South Korea, and the FBI office there, very close to the FBI office there in Seoul, South Korea, and and connected to, Richard's ADA is THAAD missiles. THAAD missiles, when they were having their big changeover or whatever at the time, they were there. They were there. They were in that area. And then, of course, one was from um, North Carolina, right? North Carolina. And another one came from Toronto, Canada, right there in the City Hall of Toronto, Canada. And then the other one came from the White House. It it led to the White House. And and you're no, we had to turn all of that in, and your jaw just drops. And what does this mean? This means that this was not just some kind of harassing, right? This was a target global PSYOP campaign. Okay. Santa Clara, Denmark, it was Denmark, NATO, um, you know, North Carolina, Toronto City Hall, the White House. I couldn't make those up if I wanted to, right? And so we turned those in, but it absolutely going to yesterday with Fort Huachuca being TRADOC, and TRADOC being assigned as our casualty affairs officer, a asymmetric warfare officer being from TRADOC being assigned as our casualty affairs officer. And we've had about six, I think six casualty affairs officer. I don't know if there's anybody like our family that have had six casualty affairs officers, right? And one of our casualty affairs officers um, took his own life, and we were harassed about that for saying that. Um, but it just shows you what the history of this case, that it does connect to the military, it does connect to the government officials. They were absolutely on a campaign to silence us, to do whatever they could to keep Richard's story buried. Richard's story buried. And, to have this come out like that, that's what we were thinking of. And I wanted to share that with you because at this time, we are so much better off than what we were years ago when we got this information, because we do have all of this support now. We do have the in the line of duty designation for Richard, the official. We do have President Trump backing that up. With his not one but two letters, that are just amazing letters, and I hope to release their entirety soon. Um, the uh, uh, the situation today is just so much different, because we know that there's this huge industrial uh, style fraud that's going on, that has been absolutely draining us of millions, and I mean, I would say billions and even into the trillions of dollars, um, and causing the inflation. What causes inflation? The putting more money into the system. When you have this kind of fraud, they're always having to add more money into the system to feed the fraud. And the more money that's in circulation, the more we have inflation. Okay. So, when dollars get scarce, then you don't have inflation, right? They become valuable. The dollars become very, very valuable. But they've been just adding so much money into the system because of all the fraud that we have had this inflation. And that's why the inflation was so bad under the Biden administration, because the fraud was just out of control, out of control. And so we've got to get the fraud controlled. And now that we know that a lot of this fraud money is used to finance campaigns, that's just like, wow. Yeah, that's a whole nother live stream. And to see that the phone number, you can tell that they're so connected, because the phone number for one of these daycares that had no children, right, was a fake daycare. Um, Led to Governor Walz's office. I just think that that was just jaw dropping, the and very telling, and very telling. And so I hope that we do get some accountability out of this, because millions and millions of people are in tune to what's going on in Minnesota, and hopefully they're connecting the dots to their own state, and that will lead to connecting dots in El Paso. And I don't see anything but good coming out of this, by getting accountability, that it would help Richard's case. So we really need to push for accountability in Minnesota, and throughout all the other states that have been engaged in this kind of industrial style fraud. Um, and the border, there's no better. I mean, the border is the epicenter of it, right? Is absolutely the epicenter. So let me read some of this. Thank you, Anicia, for coming on, for your prayers and your love. And Margaret Thurston, please help our once red state of California. Our elections have been controlled for decades. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about the elections. We've got to get our elections sorted. We really do. And and I think that would solve so many other problems, and we would have better judges and better prosecutors, and we would get accountability. Then we would get um, arrests going. And in our son's case, it's more serious. Arrests don't just cut it, right? We need to have full out um, um, trials with the death penalty on the table. And I don't say that lightly at all. The level of crime that's in our son's case is just so deserving of um, a very serious negotiation, or proving through a trial that these individuals have committed treason, that they are traitors on such a level that the death penalty needs to be on the table. You're talking about 500,000 children being trafficked. You're talking about the organ harvesting, the targeting of pregnant women in crisis for their babies, ripping them out with illegal C-sections, dumping their bodies because they take their organs as well. You're talking about the doxing of our son that led to the atrocities surrounding him, this dismemberment, possible organ harvesting, the dumping of his body over in Mexico, the not telling us, and then telling us when we found out that we have to investigate ourselves, that we have to go through this ourselves and bring them leads, otherwise they can't help us. And then being targeted by them constantly for years, targeted for years, because we do want answers. We do want our son's remains. We do want those that did this to our son to pay the full price for their evil demonic actions. And yeah, and I think that the having fair elections, elections that can be trusted, would get rid of the likes of Connell Wetton, um, Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, it's all about the elections. I think that that is the number one step, and I think President Trump has been telling us that, right? And I think he's been right all along. He's been right all along, and he's been so targeted. And so do I think he's perfect? Do I, whatever all the all that stuff that you have to kind of say when you're defending and see all the magnificent changes that President Trump has made just in 1 year. In 1 year, and there's so many, and that the cartels are absolutely shaking in their boots, and they've, El Mayo's been arrested, El Chapo's been arrested, El Chapo's son's been arrested, so many. Think about it, just like in February of 2025, 29 were extradited to the United States, cartel leaders. They are designated FTOs, I mean, and I could just go on and on and on with all of the positive things that have been happening just in this year. And so we're really looking forward to. And are there mistakes on the way? Of course, there's mistakes on the way, but I think we're going in the right direction. Of course, we got the in the line of duty designation, and now we're in the very vicious negotiation for the repatriation of our son's remains. So we've come. We're not giving up. We're there. We are absolutely there, and um, and I just think more pressure needs to be applied. More pressure, meaning with the cartels, with the military compromised leadership, with the Congress and senators that are compromised, that are part of this terrible border organized criminal trafficking group, more pressure needs to be added. They're still too protected. They're still too protected. So that's why we need to be vigilant. That's why we need to absolutely be the people, for the people, of the people, by the people, and demand accountability and fair elections. Fair elections, strong, fair paper ballot counting with witnesses, elections done in 1 day. In 1 day, that's it. That's it. And be very tough on that. Be very tough. And then hold those that have done this kind of fraud and scheming and everything accountable. So yeah, this uh, the intelligence community has been very important to getting this information. Um, and I just want to say thank you so much. And also to the special forces, thank you so much. And please continue to help in all of this to get our military back in shape. And Because, President Trump is a president of the people, by the people, for the people. He depends on us to also do our duties. Um, because the mutiny has been just like, oh my gosh, when you have Connell Wettins in there with that kind of history and those kind of connections, it's it it gets a little difficult. It gets a little difficult. These have been festering and digging roots in for a long time. So we need to also do our due diligence um, to clean this mess up. So thank you so much. Please share, 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 and look, you have a young man, right? A young man that just goes to these daycares and films it and then puts it up on a platform. And he has done more by doing that than all of CNN, NBC, CBS, Fox News, all of that. Uh, you know, so it is, it's not too big for us. That's what I want to say. They might, it's kind of like, um, the Wizard of Oz, you got this old man behind the curtain, right? And they might project themselves as this big giant, this big, very strong facade, but they're not too big for us. They're not. And with God on our side, we can absolutely, um, you know, uncover these facades and hold these criminals accountable. So thank you so